Welcome to another edition of Daily Airline News, focusing on the search for MH370. My name is Jeffrey Thomas, and I'm delighted to say, joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey in Germany. Good morning, Richard.
And good afternoon, Jeffrey.
It is a delightful afternoon here in Perth, Western Australia. And today we're going to be answering a whole range of questions from you on the AI episode and some other episodes, plus a few random questions that are rather interesting. And we're going to kick it off. And in fact, I've got the first couple, Richard. So the first one comes from Chuck K5699. Off topic, but I've been thinking there should be a regulation stating that any time an emergency evacuation is underway, that there will be a $10,000 fine for anyone insisting on retrieving anything from the overhead bins before evacuation. Slows the evacuation down way too much. Leave the crap behind and let it be, and not let people burn. Well, that's an incredibly good question and good statement. It's a massive problem. And the situation is, for the viewers who don't know, the certification of aircraft is based around a test. Now, that test requires half of the exits to be closed, assuming there's fire on one side of the aircraft. Then all the passengers have to disembark within 90 seconds. Now, those tests are done at Airbus or done at Boeing using Boeing or Airbus employees with no baggage, and they know exactly what they're going to do. They know it's a test. They know they have to get off in 90 seconds. Otherwise, the aircraft doesn't get certified. So they get off in 90 seconds. And there will be a link below. I recommend you have a look at it, to a video that shows you a disembarkation test for the A380. Now, the reality is passengers insist on taking their baggage with them. They insist on taking selfies. They even take videos, which they can hopefully upload afterwards if they survive. And some of these evacuations take 6 and 7 minutes. So it is a major problem for the industry. And I believe that with new aircraft and possibly even refitted aircraft, that for landings, that the flight attendants can lock the overhead bins and prevent anybody getting anything from them until the aircraft gets to the gate. So, but interestingly enough, we saw in Japan the A350 evacuation, Japan Airlines, when it hit a self-defense force aircraft on landing, that the Japanese all got off in double quick time. And the reason for that is because Japanese obey the instructions they're given. And the hostesses were very adamant, and they were screaming at passengers, leave everything behind. And they dutifully did. And they all got off that burning aeroplane, which was a really amazing evacuation. Richard, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I completely agree. Saving lives, including your own, is quite clearly the priority.
Yeah. So David Dooling 5997, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, gentlemen. Another small plane crashed off the southern coast of California. I have to wonder why small planes aren't equipped with a parachute system to gently lower them to earth in the event of an emergency. I see this as a feasible alternative to crashing at full speed. Yep. What's your take on this? Well, David, your thought has been taken up, in actual fact, by people like the Cirrus airplane company. They have the Cirrus airframe parachute system, CAPS, and it's a ballistic parachute recovery system for the SR-20, SR-22 and the Vision Jet. So if there's a problem, you have a parachute. Now, interestingly enough, that's been taken up by a number of other manufacturers, and it can be put in as a refit, approximately 15,000 US dollars to refit an aircraft like a Cessna 172. So that particular comment is well made and has been taken up, and it is in practice now with a limited number of aircraft. So, Hazarus, love these videos, guys. A couple of questions, if that's okay. The pilot has received so much scrutiny. Has there been as much investigation into the co-pilot or the possibility of them acting together? Secondly, the idea of a mechanical failure, fire, etc. Have tests been carried out on the same aircraft models in the Malaysian fleet to determine whether the same fault, if any, occurs in these aircraft too? And Paul, very informative podcast, Richard and Jeffrey. I'm Paul. Do we know if there was an extensive background investigation by the Malaysian authorities of the 10 flight attendants? Would have been possible for a disgruntled flight attendant with pilot training to have incapacitated by poisoning the cockpit crew and taken over the plane? Question mark. Possible motives could have included to embarrass and cause financial damage to the airline, to take revenge on a perceived injustice, such as lack of recognition or unfair disciplinary actions. Richard.
Yeah, well, very good questions. And there were extensive background checks into both pilots and all the crew members. The Malaysian authorities ruled out any possibility that it was an issue due to the background of either pilot or any of the crew members. No disgruntled employees with a reason to incapacitate the cockpit crew, for example, through poisoning or trying to embarrass Malaysian Airlines in some way. So, yeah, I'm afraid that drew a blank.
Mm. Ancora imparo piper, yet learning, I think is the translation. Dispassionately objective responses as always. It is a real pleasure and honour to be in your presence, Richard and Jeffrey. That's very nice.
Oh, very kind indeed. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Obviously, he doesn't know us.
And you may be yet learning, but we are too.
Yeah. Stephen Buckley, 212. Interesting to hear of the HEH station possible effect on the Qantas flight. That's the Harold E. Holt communication station off the coast on the coast of Western Australia. Just recently, an Australian warship sailing off the west coast of the southern part of the North Island of New Zealand was reported to have a major effect on the internet services across that region. The ship was politely asked to change frequencies, which it did.
Very interesting point, Stephen. Thank you for that. And it does back up the case that these very large and powerful transmitters can affect the internet services or radio services or even perhaps aircraft systems. So you make a good case. Thank you.
Yeah. Stick to facts, Kilo 1 Romeo. Hi, Richard. I noticed that the simulator data that has been made available to investigators and is cited in the Royal Malaysian Police report lacks dates. I can't see any reference to February 2, 2014. The whole date time system section seems to be missing and appears to me to have been replaced by gibberish characters. Do you know why that is? As I understand it, the ATSB has data that includes the date, time, season section. Is this correct? And why would it not be publicly available?
Yeah, well, it's a very good question, and perhaps it should be addressed to the Malaysian authorities, the FBI, and the ATSB. In my view, the Malaysian authorities tried to recover the data, and what is in the Royal Malaysian Police report is, as you mentioned, partly gibberish and partly legible data. And then because they didn't get complete sets, they asked the FBI for help. And what the FBI found out has not been published. So we've got the gibberish or part gibberish, part legible from the Malaysian investigation. And the ATSB confirm that they do have 4 complete data sets, including the date, time, season section. But why that is not publicly available, I don't know.
Joseph Brown, Hotel Mike 9, Hotel Kilo. Re Ian 955 and Small Wonders comments. Possibly some points missed. First is that probably, I know it's not certain, but it's likely, the people outside the cockpit were relatively quickly disabled and ultimately passed away by having the air pressure lowered. I understand this very quickly puts people to sleep before they pass away. The cabin crew do have extra oxygen, but it's limited and will also run out. I understand one crew member did try to call but wasn't able to get a coherent message through. The plane that flew over Greece and that golfer's plane showed the quick effect of this scenario. Secondly, there is an issue with having any ability to override cockpit security. The inability to breach the cockpit was developed because armed terrorists were taking over cockpits, notably 9/11. So how many crew members, or even marshals, were going to resist overriding cockpit security if, for example, someone has a sharp object being pushed into their eye? We either have secured cockpits or we don't.
Yeah, very good point. There is actually no conclusive evidence, as you point out, of a mass hypoxia of the passengers, such as was the case on the Helios flight F522. If there was a mass hypoxia, then there were turns after diversion around Penang and another one into the Indian Ocean. And these may have been pre-programmed into the flight management system. But the key for me is if there was a mass hypoxia, who reactivated the SATCOM system around an hour after diversion? I'd also point out since 9/11, hijackings have decreased by 92%. So we're not quite there, but we're getting close to the target of no hijackings at all.
DR Amir Sheikh 9754. In the Air France 447 crash, I understand that the static ports had iced up, but was a radio altimeter available or active?
Yep, the radio altimeter was working fine. That gives altitude. It doesn't give the attitude of the aircraft. The pilot flying, a junior first officer, pulled the nose up when the autopilot disconnected, and that was a critical error. The A330 was already at high altitude where the air is thin. Pulling up causes a rapid loss of lift and can initiate a stall. And lo and behold, the aircraft stall warning sounded multiple times, very loud and clear in the cockpit, stall, stall. And why did the pilots ignore the warnings, you may well ask? Well, when technology suddenly quits, like the autopilot disengaging, and the pilots have to take over in an emergency situation, the question is, how are they supposed to cope? Well, the way they cope is by training, memory-based checklists, standard operating procedures, and then reverting to their manual flying skills. But when you get overwhelmed by conflicting alarms, such as was the case with Qantas 72, with 400 ECAM messages in 4 minutes, and what the captain described as a complete sensory overload, then you can easily misinterpret faulty instrument data, or you can make inappropriate control inputs under stress. And that's what happened on Air France 447.
But Richard, wasn't there a mechanical attitude indicator operating?
Yep. And the pilots were obviously completely distracted by all of the caution and warning indications and didn't concentrate on flying the aircraft with the backup uh, attitude indicator and altitude indicator.
I mean, if the co-pilot or the pilot flying in the co-pilot seat had looked, he would have seen just simply blue sky, a blue, and just push the nose
Yeah.
down, and you would then see blue, then brown.
Yeah. And they quite clearly were not looking at the instruments
Mm.
and were caught by surprise and were trying to deal or making assumptions what was going on
Yes.
uh, and trying to handle the situation based on assumptions rather than on their instruments.
Yeah. So, Mr. G, London, hi guys, wonderful show as always. Thank you for your dedication. I have a question to Richard. Considering the perpetrator has done everything to mislead air traffic control and go unnoticed, I have a great fear that once the aircraft is found, there'll be absolutely useless, empty flight recorders too. Would it have been possible to disable the recorders, erase data during the flight? Many thanks and keep up the good work.
Yes, you can disable, but it will take quite an effort. You obviously, as a pilot, know where the flight data recorder is housed, and you can disable it by disconnecting all the cables, but you can't erase it. So the data up until that point will be available. But it's a good point, Mr. G.
So, Paul D. Meyer Abel, I get bored on long flights and sometimes scan Bluetooth devices. My last flight from Zurich to JFK, I recorded more than 1,000 unique BT devices on the aircraft. I expect the Wi-Fi load was a subset of that, but probably about 80%. It does make me wonder.
Yeah, Paul, and it makes me wonder as well. And it confirms what we've been saying the other day that a lot of passengers still use their personal electronic devices, still have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi switched on, even if the cellular connection is switched off.
So, K-Man of Kent, good afternoon, gents. Many thanks for another great episode. Just an aside, I saw from my apartment overlooking Southampton Water proceeding outbound Armada 7802. At the moment, she is inbound to the Solent, having passed the Needles and Hurst Point. As you say, Richard, 7806 may be heading this way for future employment. Thanks once again, Richard, Jeffrey, and Blaine, for explaining the different aspects of this tragedy. Cheers.
Yeah, I tracked Armada 7802, and as you say, it took a trip out to the Needles. I've sailed those waters myself, and it's now back in Southampton and docked at the harbour.
Now, Richard, here is a long series of questions and interesting, really interesting ones. It's from Ari in Iceland. That's on my travel, that's on my bucket list, Iceland, I'll tell you. Um, I'm a radio amateur and have been working with commercial aircraft for many years and have been a radio amateur for 45 years. My call sign is Tango Foxtrot 1 Alpha. The good news, I watch you and your friend from Australia every morning and I love it. Iceland is permanently on UTC time. Now the bad news. All commercial aircraft that fly over 20,000 feet have no GSM coverage from the cockpit. If a pilot needs a GSM connection, he has to go to a window in the cabin. The front glass of the cockpit is made of gold, so radiation from sun cannot penetrate through. Pilots spend a long time at altitude and radiation levels from the sun are much higher. So, did Captain Sahari Shah get locked out of the cockpit by the hijacker and was on his mobile in the passenger cabin trying to get help? The HF transmitter in commercial aircraft is a single sideband 400 watt AM VHF transmitter with a transmission power of 50 watts. GSM uses time diversion multiple access, TDMA, which is based on time diversion multiplexing, TDM, and a transmit maximum of 3 watts. The captain's mobile phone battery will last only a short time. If the phone is trying to use full power, remember the transmission power is auto-adjusted by software, the frequency and timing will change. Wi-Fi in Europe and other countries is limited to 0.001 watt or 1 milliwatt. In the USA, Wi-Fi can transmit up to 10 megawatt and is also, that might be milliwatt, I should say, sorry, and is also a TDM signal. You can get mobile phone connection from all new aircraft today by using the aircraft internet connection and Wi-Fi over SIM. I tried it on my flight from Iceland to Tenerife. What I know is the reason why GSM is forbidden in aircraft is to avoid the fight to get a window seat to be able to make a call. Radio frequencies are dangerous in aircraft when HF antenna are in the wing and the passenger sits in the window seat by the wing. I have no idea why that is dangerous, but apparently 400 watt in close proximity is bad for you. That's a lot of questions.
A lot of questions.
He obviously knows what he's talking about. Well, I think he does.
Well, he's obviously an expert on amateur radio and obviously very familiar with aircraft. And indeed, Ari, you're right. The cockpit window of a Boeing 777, for example, and most modern airliners are designed to reflect the sun's radiation, particularly infrared and ultraviolet light. The windows have metallic oxide coatings, often made of gold or silver-based films, that reflect the infrared radiation to reduce heat buildup in the cockpit, and they block the ultraviolet rays to protect the pilot's skin and eyes, and also protect the cockpit material, which will degrade over time from UV exposure. As far as your point about Captain Sahari Shah talking on his phone in the cockpit, on the ground, you can actually open the cockpit side window. You can't do that once you've taken off, but obviously that window needs to be shut and sealed before you take off. But whilst you're on the ground, you can open it. There are, apart from the GSM standard that you mentioned, another 15 to 20 mobile standards, and many of them are digital mobile. and between the 2G GSM and the 5G, several generations. And Captain Sahari Shah's Nokia Lumia 925 was connected on a Cellcom Malaysia 4G LTE standard. And you're quite correct. Several digital mobile standards will change transmission power and transmission frequency. And you're also correct that a higher transmission power will significantly affect battery life. On flight MH370, the aircraft 9M MRO was equipped with a Collins HFS 900 radio system, and it has a 200 watt peak envelope power. TDM, time division multiplexing, is only relevant to GSM, in other words, 2G mobile phones. Bluetooth uses TDM, but Wi-Fi uses CSMA-CA, which is carrier sense multiple access with collision avoidance, a different system. Wi-Fi is commonly available on wide-body commercial airliners, but on narrow-body and regional airliners, it depends very much on the airline. The reason why passengers prefer the window seat is because they like to watch out the window. There is less foot traffic, and you can lean against the sidewall when you want to sleep. And you're also in control of the window blind. So I think that's the major reasons why there's a preference for window seat. And the HF antenna on most older aircraft was a long fuselage to vertical stabilizer wire antenna. On the Boeing 777 and the A330, it's above the rear fuselage and goes up to the vertical stabilizer. On the 787 and A350, it's under the fuselage, so not in the wings. And standing next to a 400 watt HF transmitting antenna will cause radio frequency burns and tissue burning if you touch the antenna. But that cannot happen on a commercial aircraft because you cannot touch the antenna, and you are shielded from the antenna, and you're at least 2 meters away from the antenna at the closest possible point. So you make a whole bunch of interesting points, but I don't think we've got a watertight case that the captain was locked out of the cockpit and was on his phone against a cabin window.
No, would seem not. Yeah, fascinating questions, though, Richard. Very, very interesting group.
Well, the last one from us, I think 13 questions buried in that
Yes.
one comment.
Yeah. So, viewers, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you, Richard, for your input on these questions, and thank you to me for my input as well for a change. So, viewers, I'm off to the Paris Air Show tonight, and we'll be back on Saturday. Tomorrow, we've got an episode with Blaine Gibson, which I recorded, and that'll be up tomorrow. So that'll be worth watching. And Richard and I'll be back on Saturday answering some more questions. Will we not, Richard?
Indeed. They're coming through thick and fast.
They are indeed, and they're excellent questions. So we'll be back with you. Richard and I will be back with you on Saturday. Blaine and I'll be with you tomorrow. So thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for your likes. Thank you for your comments. They're really fantastic. And thank you for your questions. And once again, Richard, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.